Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Yoma Daf Kavchet through Lamed Daled, 28 through 34. Kavchet, 28. Uvayom Hashmini Yimol Basar Lato. The Torah tells us that on the 8th day you shall circumcise the baby boy. Malamed Shekol Yom Kasher Milah. The fact that it says Uvayom, it tells you that the Brit Milah is valid if performed at any time during the day on that 8th day. It need not be performed at any specific time during the daylight hours. Any time is fine. Ella, however, shazrizim makdim mitzvot. Those who are good about the performance of the mitzvot do so with alacrity early on in the day. The Talmud quotes the pasuk concerning Avraham Avinu's behavior at the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, that he got up early and saddled his donkey, to teach you that you should do mitzvot at the earliest possible opportunity, which would mean then that for a Brit Milah, in the morning, early in the morning, on the 8th day is the appropriate time. Accordingly, most Brit Milah ceremonies are done after the Shacharit service in the synagogue in the morning. When might it be necessary to do a Brit Milah later in the day? So one possibility is if the mohel, the circumciser, is unavailable until sometime later. He has many circumcisions to do in one day, and you're not the first one, so inevitably it's going to be a little bit later in the day. Another scenario where it has to be later in the day is when a baby was sick, and the Brit Milah is not taking place on the 8th day, but rather 7 days after the baby recovers from illness. And then it is calculated that from the moment the doctors say the baby is available for the Brit, literally 7 days exactly later, that's when the Brit should occur. Well, if it happened to have taken place in the afternoon that the baby healed, then the Brit Milah will take place 7 days later in the afternoon. Daf Chavtet, 29. What happens if a Kohen arranged the showbread and the frankincense on the table on the shulchan, not on Shabbat afternoon when it was appropriate to do so, but rather after Shabbat, Saturday night, or sometime even later than that. And then the next Saturday, the next Shabbat, they sacrificed the frankincense. Pesula, the loaves of the showbread are now invalid. Ketzad ya'aseh. So what should you do? Yanichenu l'Shabbat haba. Well, actually, the option is to leave the breads on the table till the following week. And then, when the bazichin of the following week are sacrificed, on that Shabbat, the bread will be distributed among the Kohanim and eaten. And if you think, well, maybe this is only valid if you are kadam v'silko, you remove the showbread from the table late on Friday, the second Friday, and then rearrange it on Shabbat as appropriate, and then take it off the following Shabbat. Well, that's not necessary. That since it was placed at the incorrect time, it's as though it was placed there by a monkey, meaning it doesn't count the fact that it was placed earlier on. It's enough to leave the showbread on the table, take it off a week later, and then it will be fine. Daf Lamed. Shalut ben Zoma, Tavila Zulama. They asked a question of the Tanaim, why does the Mishnah say that anybody who enters in the temple courtyard in order to do an avodah must go to the mikveh first? Ben Zoma explained that it's a Torah law based upon logic. If, when changing from a holy place to another holy place, meaning the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he changes the location of his service from the Kodesh Kadashim to the Kodesh or back and forth, he has an immersion in the mikveh in between each service. And both of those places are places where a person will be punished with karet if they went in while tameh, while impure. So if those scenarios require an immersion, then all the more so, if you change from a mundane place, namely outside the courtyard, to a holy place, namely the courtyard, that you'll have to do an immersion. So this is Ben Zoma's approach, that it is a Torah law based upon logic, a svara, that you have to immerse before service. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Srach Tfilah Hizu. It's not a Torah law. It's only a rabbinic law. It was imposed by the rabbis as a reminder that just in case you had an earlier bout of impurity that you had not yet rectified, that you'll remember it now when we tell you to go to the mikveh, and you will abstain from entering the temple complex illegitimately. So it's a reminder to avoid a potential transgression. Daf Lamed Aleph, 31. Is it possible to avoid going to the mikveh before doing the service by avoiding going into the temple courtyard and instead doing the service just at the edges of the courtyard. What scenario is that? Well, the shchita. What happens if a person had a very long knife? If I'm standing near the entrance of the temple courtyard with a 5-foot long knife, and I do the shchita on the animal which is positioned near the doorway, and I don't go in, can I abstain from immersion in the mikveh by using that strategy? The Gemara asks, and the Gemara says, Teku. We don't have an answer. Lamed Bet, 32. The Mishnah says, Merek Acher Shechita al Yado, that when the Kohen Gadol does the slaughter of the Tamid Shel Shachar on Yom Kippur, that he does the initial incision, but that someone else finishes the task of the Shechita so that the Kohen Gadol can receive the blood in the service vessel. So the Gemara wonders, why is it necessary for anyone to finish the Shechita? Because after all, we have a halachic concept of rov echad ba'of rov shnaim v'hema, that it is sufficient to sever the majority of one of the pipes, whether trachea or esophagus, for the slaughter of a bird, and a majority of both of the pipes, trachea and esophagus, for the slaughter of livestock, of a sheep. So if the Kohen only has to do a partial incision and not sever the whole thing, why bother having anyone finish the task? The answer is, mitzvah marek, it is lechatchila, ideally, ab initio, preferred to do the full shchita of the animal's pipes. And so since the Kohen Gadol can't do that himself, we have someone else fill in his place as the Kohen Gadol grabs the bucket. Lamed Gimel. Why is it that when the preparing of the wicks of the lamps of the menorah on a daily basis in the temple is done, it was done with 5 candles first being prepared, and then later on 2 candles being prepared, with a space in between to do other activities. So the Gemara says, well, Navid Shteinerot, well, I could have done 2 and then 5. Why 5 and then 2? The Gemara says, since you're starting, do the majority of what you need to do. In other words, 5 and then 2 is better than 2 and then 5 because we want to do the majority first. But then, why not just do 6? If we have to break it up, but we want to do the majority in the beginning, so instead of doing 5 and 2, do 6 and 1. Which the Gemara responds, it says in the Torah, neirot. And neirot means plural, and the smallest number of plural is 2. Therefore, of necessity, it's 5 and then 2, and not 6 and then 1. Lamed Daled. The Mishnah had said that if the water of the mikveh was too cold for an elderly Kohen Gadol, or for a Kohen Gadol who was of weak physical constitution, an istinus, that they would heat up the water for him. But you really can't heat up the water on Yom Kippur because of a ban on cooking the water. So, Ashashot shel barzel mechamen Rav Yom Kippur, they would heat up pieces of lead, of metal, on Erev Yom Kippur, and then Matil Tochatzon, and they would throw this hot metal into the cold water on Yom Kippur, so that the temperature of the water would go up, that the chill of the water, the chilling effects of the water would be reduced. And this way, there was no chilul Yom Kippur, there was no violation of the laws of Malacha on Yom Kippur, and the Kohen Gadol was able to have a fairly warm bath. Everyone have a great week.